Hey everyone, I'm Almar of almarsguides.com, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about whether or not we're playing classic WoW correctly. Now, this is a discussion that I've had with quite a few of my friends that are WoW veterans just like myself. Basically, all of us have collector's editions from the original classic WoW, so we've been playing since day one. We've raided through all of vanilla. The majority of us were in top tier guilds. One of my friends was in Relentless on Deathkiss, which later went on to Laughing Skull. I was in High Warlord Pat's guild on Arthas, and the future iterations of that guild led by somebody named Chrysalid, and I can't remember who he eventually passed leadership to. But all of us have high-end raiding experience in guilds in original classic WoW, and a lot of us have played on private servers a teeny-weeny bit. Like, I got to level 60, did maybe 3 raids on private servers, then quit. So I can't speak about private servers with any amount of authority or any amount of, I know this is how things were, but in classic WoW, I was very attentive in that game, and I basically had no life. So I remember things quite well, and so far every single person that I've talked to, except for people that I specifically met in this vanilla new WoW, we all remember things the same way, and everything is different than how it is now. And I'm going to explain that for the purposes of this video, and I'm going to explain how I think almost everybody right now is playing vanilla WoW like current WoW. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The first thing I would like to start with is these best in slot lists on Icy Veins. When you Google a best in slot list for your class, Icy Veins is pretty much the main thing that comes up. Wowhead 2, sometimes maybe a Google document, it depends. Now, specifically, let's start with the warrior gear on Icy Veins. Warrior tank gear, specifically. Now, for tanks, something new in this era, specific vanilla WoW, whatever you would like to call it, they're telling tanks to gear with threat gear. Now, threat gear, as you might imagine, is DPS gear. Stuff like this. Savage Gladiator Chain. This is something that they consider best in slot tank gear because it helps with threat. Now, this is something that I think is completely new. I've never, ever heard of tanks gearing in DPS gear unless they stupidly, dramatically outgeared the instance they are doing, in which case they usually weren't even protection, or they were barely into protection. They went in there for like 17 points or something like that. Now, I've never ever heard of a tank doing this in a dungeon that is their difficulty level, like Molten Core, especially raids. Like, I've healed tanks in DPS gear before in normal 5-mans, and boy, was it hard. But when it comes to raids, I've never even seen it happen before, except for this era of WoW. And I don't think it's correct, to put it bluntly. I think everybody is gearing wrong. All of these tanks gearing in threat gear, you're doing it wrong. I mean, it's just, nobody used to do it like this way, and there's obviously something going on that is forcing tanks to gear in tank gear. I mean, to gear in DPS gear instead of in tank gear, and that's primarily what we're going to address with this video. I remember tanks having some threat problems, the shitty tanks, in original vanilla, but for the most part, tanks were able to hold threat pretty well. And I think one of the main reasons for that is we waited until 3 to 5 Sunders to start DPS. People don't do that right now. People just, like, the second the bosses pull, you see people just spamming their keys like, gotta do that DPS, gotta do that DPS. And that's wrong. You don't do that. It's not good DPS to do that, and you're also putting more stress on the rest of the raid by doing that. Well, actually, it is good DPS doing that until you die by pulling aggro. But let me explain how you're putting more trouble and more stress on the rest of the raid by doing that. First off, you're making the fucking tanks gear in DPS gear just to hold threat over you attacking too fast. Why is no one calling this out? Why are we literally gearing our tanks in threat gear instead of telling the DPS, hey man, stop playing the game like that. Wait until 3 to 5 Sunders like we originally did in original vanilla. I mean, it's the same deal in EverQuest. If you play EverQuest progression servers like current EverQuest live servers, you're going to suck. You're going to wipe repeatedly over and over and over and over again, and I know because I did it that way, and I sucked on the EverQuest progression servers, and I hated them because the game was so much different. And World of Warcraft is the same way. We're trying to play it like the WoW that we're familiar with, and we're all wrong. It's not how the game is meant to be played. And that's why tanks have to go out of their way and gear themselves in this sort of shitty-ass gear to hold threat over characters that don't know what they're doing, or aren't playing properly, or aren't gearing properly. And that brings me to my number 2 point, which is these best in slot lists that are telling people to gear in full spell power gear like this. Specifically, I play Warlocks, so I'm going to focus on Warlocks to bitch at. Anybody who puts Fellclaw, anybody who thinks this is a pre-raid best in slot is part of the problem. The Fellclaw shoulders, they're not. I mean, look at them. You can get, let me show you the ones from BRD that are way better. These Kinetic Amis. I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong like a retard. There you go. 14 spell power compared to the 26. And look at the stats it comes with instead. 13 int, 5 stem, 6 spirit. Way better stats than the other ones. Great trade-off. You lose out on like 10 spell power for, buku other stats. You can't really go wrong with that. Now, the reason you don't want to focus on spell power this much is because, well, specifically as a Warlock, you have no way of dumping threat. On my raids, Warlocks are the main things that are pulling threat. And I think we're honestly probably the main part of the problem of why tanks have to gear in their DPS/threat gear. Warlocks should not be focusing on this for multiple reasons. Life tap, for example, the main one, we convert health to mana. Therefore, stam is just as important to mana or health as us. Arguably even more important. Another reason that these glass cannon ideas are really stupid. Because you're putting so much strain not only on the tanks but on the healers. Healers don't have much mana in this era. I play a healer on raids too, and I very fast. As a DPSer, healers aren't always going to be able to heal you. As a Warlock, when you're life tapping, healers, you can't expect a healer to always go out of their way and cast like a renew or a rejuvenation on you. Because they need that for the tank. They need that for other people who aren't life tapping themselves. And for other people who are actually taking damage. One life tap with like full glass cannon here, actually, let's show that on my Warlocks. One full life tap is about 20% of my health on the Warlocks that I gear glass cannon style. It's specifically 17% of my health. So 2 or 3 life taps plus 1 raid AoE is basically dead Warlock. On bosses like Ragnaros, that's no bueno. You can't do any damage at all if you die. And also, as a glass cannon, you're putting more strain on the rest of the raid to pick up your slack because you're gearing improperly. At least that's how I feel towards it. Because Warlocks are meant to be pretty beefy. And this does not let us be pretty beefy. We have no way of dumping threat, so we're basically... I don't even know where to begin with the Warlock class in this current era of WoW. So many of us, I feel, are playing so incorrectly because we're just concerned about topping the DPS meters that we lose sight of reality. Mathematically, the gear you're looking at right here is best in slot. I mean, just hands down mathematically, it makes sense. Logically, it makes no sense at all. Having no health versus a shit ton of spell power, there's so many reasons it's wrong, to the point of where literally the entire raid has to build themselves around this silliness. Like I said, tanks are literally using threat gear because they can't hold aggro over pretty much Warlocks. I mean, I don't understand why more people aren't drawing attention to this problem, and why some of the apparently best players in the world, I'm using air quotes, have not recognized this. Why they haven't said like, do you guys remember using DPS gear back on raids? No. Huh. That's new. I wonder what's causing it. No one's asked that question. People are just like, oh, I need DPS gear to hold aggro, I guess. And there's no explanation of why this change occurred, what happened to make this change, and what could we do to remedy it. And I don't understand why that conversation isn't occurring, and it's only occurring in my social circle. Every person that I talk to outside of my social circle tells me I'm wrong, and that I don't know more than the best tanks in the world that are using their DPS gear on raids. So that's why I decided to make this video. It's a discussion of sorts, and I would like to hear everybody else's feedback. What do you think about my ideas and what I think the current problem is? And are you guys noticing the same things on your raids? Are your tanks using DPS gear to hold aggro? And also, do you remember tanks ever using DPS gear to hold aggro in original vanilla? Let me know what you guys think and leave a comment below. I would love to hear it. I would love to have this discussion with some people. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next video. That's all for now.